Join me for the next 10 minutes or so as we explore a range of learning and teaching theories. In this presentation, I'll explore 5 orientations of learning: behaviourism, cognitivism, humanism, social constructivism, and situated learning. I'll explain each theory drawing on a range of literature. I'll make comparisons and provide examples and reflections from my own and others' teaching experiences. If you're a new teacher in an applied learning setting, you might find this of interest. My name is Marcus and I've been teaching for around 17 years or so in the vocational education and training sector at TAFE, and also in the school system teaching Year 11 and 12 students. I teach in the areas of information technology and music. To give my presentation in theory some context, I'll be mostly talking about adult learners and the 16 to 19 year olds who study VET in schools. Knowles identified some principles about adult learners and also said that younger people seem to learn better when some features of this model were applied. So I'll be presenting the theories in the context of adult and older learners. Let's get into it. First, we have behaviourism. When people think of behaviourism, they often think about slobbering dogs and rats pressing buttons, but it's more than that. Behaviourism tries to explain internal mental processes in terms of observable behaviours, and it came about partly due to a bloke named John B. Watson, who in the early 20th century thought that for psychology to be accepted as a true science, a structured approach needed to be taken with measurable results. Pavlov then went off to conduct his experiments with bells and drooling dogs. The change of behaviour he observed in the canines was a basic kind of learning called classical conditioning, which pairs a stimulus with a naturally occurring pre-existing response. While not a super useful method of teaching specific things in your class, classical conditioning might help you set up an atmosphere. If you are enthusiastic about your subject area, your students may be conditioned to enjoy being in your class. Next, there's Skinner's rats. Skinner trained his rats to press a lever for food, but only when the light was on. The cool thing about this is that pressing a button is not a naturally occurring pre-existing response in rats like drooling is in dogs. The rats had learned and operated on their environment. This is called operant conditioning. Skinner suggested that if learning goal can be broken down into smaller parts, operant conditioning can be a useful tool for teaching complex tasks. This idea has similarities to competency-based training. Thorndike's theory of trial and error emphasises that reinforcement of behaviour is important, and the responses followed by a pleasurable consequence are more likely to be repeated. In my own experience in VET, I can see the influence of behaviourist theories on competency-based training. The focus is on the behaviour itself, and complex tasks are broken down into elements and performance criteria. Assessments are made based on specific, measurable or observable behaviours. An example of where a behaviourist approach would be useful in my discipline area might be helping a rock band learn a new song. Rather than hoping it just all comes together in the practice room, the teacher could break the song up into smaller parts and use shaping to reward the band or individual members after they successfully perform each part. This can then be repeated with each additional part, reinforcing successful performances. Once the band can play through the verse, chorus and other parts successfully, the whole song could come together, with the terminal behaviour being an awesome performance of the song. As adult learners are often internally motivated and goal-orientated, the reward could simply be the song itself. I've been both the teacher and the student in this scenario. Skinner said that operant conditioning shapes behaviour as a sculptor shapes a lump of clay. Where behaviourism is concerned with observable changes in behaviour, Cognitivism deals with the internal processes involved inside the learner's head. A cognitive perspective suggests that new learning builds upon previous learning, and learning involves deriving meaning. Meaning is dependent upon relationships. Learning occurs through insight. Motivation is internal, and learners are aware of their new knowledge. Piaget suggested that knowledge is stored using a schema to organise it in our minds, and he also had an equilibrium theory. When you're at equilibrium, what you know and what you observe are at one. When something new happens, you're in a state of disequilibrium. From here, you've got a couple of choices. You can assimilate the new knowledge if it fits in with your existing schema, or you can accommodate it and modify your schema and your view of the world. Then you'll be at equilibrium again. Wolfgang Collier said that insight takes place without using trial and error. It occurs when people recognise relationships between things, and the new knowledge is formed in your head. Osubel says that new knowledge is only meaningful if it can be related to what you already know, and that learning should be presented in a structured order from simple to complex. He also used advanced organisers to frame the learning about to be undertaken and focus the learner's attention. Jerome Brunner talked about discovery learning, which takes place when the learning is not provided by the teacher but is independently arrived at by the learner. He believed that presenting information in a superstructured manner made the learners over-dependent on others. Unlike Ozyobel, Brunner believed that learners should have the opportunity to discover the information themselves. I find the technique of Brunner's inductive sequencing works well in the ICT classroom when dealing with computer hardware. Students are excited to dismantle and rebuild a PC, and after covering relevant OH&S issues, I let them go for it. They are to completely dismantle the computer, show me so that I can provide some feedback, and then reassemble it. The learning is not provided by the teacher, but independently arrived at by the student. Learners should have the opportunity to discover the information for themselves. The teacher's role is more of a facilitator, guiding the students towards the educational objectives. Once they have completed the task, we can discuss any more abstract ideas, iconic and symbolic modes, that might have arose, and that have something tangible to relate it to. It starts with the concrete and moves towards the abstract as we unpack what we found when doing the task. Humanism came about in the swinging 60s and believes that all people are fundamentally good, free-willed and capable of achieving their best when an ideal learning environment is produced. Some basic principles of humanistic education include feelings as well as knowledge are important in the learning process. Students learn best in a non-threatening environment. Students' learning should be self-directed. Schools should produce students who want to and know how to learn. The only form of meaningful evaluation is self-evaluation. Assessments are about personal achievement. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a study in what motivates humans. People progress through it only when the previous stages have been fulfilled. Humans are naturally good and want to better themselves, so Maslow thought that moving through the stages was a natural desire and its own reward. Carl Rogers talked about the student-centered approach for learning and saw teachers as facilitators. Teachers became a resource for learners rather than a director. That's from Gould 2012. I feel I identify most with the humanistic approach in my teaching. I aim to create a supported and inclusive classroom environment that students feel comfortable in, and each individual is valued. Social constructivism highlights the importance of social interactions in learning. Bandura's social learning says that learning happens through social contact by observation, imitation, and modelling. Teachers should model good behaviour. Bandura discussed self-efficacy. The more a student believes in themselves, the more likely they are to succeed. Based mostly on the work of Piaget and Brunner, social constructivism was developed by Vygotsky. Vygotsky rejected the assumption made by Piaget that it was important to separate learning from its social context. Vygotsky introduced the concept of a zone of proximal development illustrated by this image. The shaded area in the middle represents what can be achieved with the support of a more knowledgeable other. The process of supporting a learner through their ZPD is called scaffolding. Social constructivism allows students to interact with the content and each other in a way they find meaningful. That's from Isbell 2011. Examples include class discussions, group work, peer tutoring, and collaborations. Most of these can transfer to an online environment, which is fantastic in today's world. An example where I've used social constructivism in my music classroom is a songwriting task. For scaffolding, I provide a live model while writing a song together as a whole class. Then we discuss song structures and techniques for a verbal instructional model, and provide a symbolic model with examples of well-written songs. Then, students break off into their groups and work together to create their songs. In the 1990s, education theorist Lev and Wegner developed situated learning theory. The theory argues that learning occurs best when it takes place in the context of where it's applied, and knowledge is socially co-constructed by a community. Lev and Wegner said that a community of practice is a group of professionals who share a craft. We start our learning as a peripheral participant, and as we build confidence, we become full members of our community of practice. According to Wegner, communities of practice must have the following three elements. A domain, which is a shared interest that provides an incentive for the group to come together. A community, the group of people who come together with that common interest. And practice, the agreed ways to implement and formalise the group. This could be making professional standards or even promoting the community. So to put it simply, if you want to be a musician, hang out with musicians. If you want to learn how to build a house, then spend some time with some carpenters. Examples of this in teaching include excursions, guest speakers, work placements. I've been involved in various COPs in my career, including with music teachers, around online delivery of qualifications, and about using social media in education. So, to sum up, in this presentation I've explored 5 learning theories, drawn on a range of literature. I've made comparisons and provided examples and reflections of my own teaching experiences. These 5 orientations of learning overlap with each other a lot, but Gould said that there is no single theory which adequately explains all the different facets of learning, and that arriving at your own eclectic theory of learning which works for you and informs your practice is the ultimate purpose.